guys, it's Silver, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the social and medical models of disability, what they mean, how they're defined, and how they relate to DID and OSDD. These models are lenses into how we view disability, and to really get down into what these models are and how they impact disabled people, we really have to get into defining disability. For all intents and purposes, when someone is disabled, it means that they are limited in some way, shape, or form from fully engaging with society as a whole. The very basic example of this is a disabled person who uses a wheelchair. If they want to attend a meeting on the 4th floor of a building without an elevator, they are physically unable to get to that meeting. What this means is that we're not defining disability based on the physical differences in people. And this is a very key point. One of my favorite examples of this is the fact that we have really bad eyesight. Without our glasses, we can't see something literally this far in front of our face. And in any society that has not invented or uses eyeglasses, this would be a severe impairment in our day-to-day life trying to navigate the world around us. But eyeglasses are so widely used and so readily available, I'm not considered disabled for having horribly bad eyesight. I have full access to society and my access needs are met. Therefore, disability doesn't hinge on your body or your brain. It hinges on your ability to interact with society. So how does this reflect into models of how we view disability? The model we are all familiar with is the medical model. The medical model views disability as something that is wrong with your body or your brain, and that disability is an individual issue that you should go to a doctor or go to a therapist to fix, and then to re-enter society when you are healed or the disability is properly corrected. To continue with the glasses metaphor, if we were in a society that had not invented glasses, but had somehow invented LASIK surgery, under this model, we would be expected to go seek out LASIK surgery, correct our vision, and then re-enter society when we were ready. To contrast this, the model suggested by a lot of disability activists is the social model of disability. The social model of disability suggests that we are not disabled by our bodies, but we are disabled by the society around us. This concept rests upon the fundamentals that our society and the structures we build are fundamentally catered towards a certain group of bodies. Bodies that can walk, bodies that can hear, bodies that process sensory information correctly, and neurotypical able-bodied modes of being. This is apparent in practically every way our society manifests. Therefore, disabled people are not disabled because they're wrong or abnormal, but because society only caters towards abled people and is not accessible for disabled people, and quite literally, the structures can exclude them. Therefore, under the social model of disability, the steps we take to include disabled people are changing the fabric of society so that it's inclusive and accessible to all people of all body types and all brain types. In terms of the eyeglasses example, this would look like providing large print handouts, providing very good text-to-speech capabilities, Braille would be on every wall in every book, and making sure that people with low vision can easily navigate the world. Obviously, glasses have been invented, so what are some examples where this actually impacts the real world? For example, back to wheelchair users. The social model of disability suggests that the reason wheelchair users are disabled is not because of their physical body, it's because there's not adequate ramps and there's not adequate elevators to get them to that 4th floor meeting in an inaccessible building. The structures around them prohibit them from fully accessing what should be accessible to everyone. Thus, under these two models, there are two very different ways of approaching how to get a disabled person actively interacting with society again. Under the medical model, things like surgery, individual accessibility tools, and different types of therapy are all options that are used very frequently. Under the social model of disability, things like universal design, such as including ramps and elevators in all buildings, captioning, text-to-speech, and a whole bunch of different accessibility things that can be worked into the fabric of society to make sure that the structures around people are accessible. And especially recently with disability activists, there's been a large push towards the social model of disability. The medical model puts the burden on the individual to seek care and change something about themselves to be able to access society again, versus the social model, which actively puts the burden on society to make society as a whole accessible to everyone, including disabled people. When we only use the medical model, disabled people are forced to change something about themselves or their way of life to continue to engage with society, whereas able people automatically can. This is inherently inequitable and why we need to incorporate the social model into how we approach disability. Obviously, under this view, we are not disavowing everything medical. Things like pain meds and glasses and therapy are still wonderful tools that definitely need to be used. But there's a whole bunch of issues that come with relying solely upon these supports, such as pain medications, eyeglasses, or wheelchairs. The first being they're not guaranteed. You could slowly build up resistance to your pain medications and they could stop working over time. Secondly, medical model supports may not work for everyone. When it comes to psychiatric medications, not all medications work for everyone forever. 50 to 60% of people with depression don't recover fully just from psychiatric medication. And for those with bipolar on lithium, you cannot take lithium for your entire life due to quite literal lithium poisoning. Hearing aids are helpful for those who are hard of hearing, but do not meet the access needs for those who are fully deaf. Also, not all of these things are financially accessible to everyone. Eyeglasses have been getting more and more expensive over the past years, and especially with worse and worse vision, they can cost upwards of $600. Therapy is really expensive. It's almost $100 per session without insurance. Things like wheelchairs are insanely expensive, over thousands and thousands of dollars to get a really good workable wheelchair that is fully accessible and meant to be used by the person in the chair. And then finally, these things are not 100%. Wheelchairs obviously don't give someone 100% access to society. We don't have equipment on a financial or even just a technological level to let wheelchair users fully access buildings that have very steep stairs or broken cobbled pavement. Pain meds don't cover everything a chronically ill person has to deal with society. And therefore, to fill these holes, we must embrace the social model of disability to really make sure that disabled people can fully access society as they need and as they deserve. These two models should be working in synergy because at the end of the day, everything on the medical side should be a choice. A lot of things recommended to people are often invasive procedures or invasive medication. Not only can not everyone financially afford things like surgery and pain medications, but a lot of people just don't want to go through long, invasive, intensive surgeries. A lot of people just don't want to take psychiatric medication. All of these things are okay, and these people should still be able to access society as a whole without invasive and intensive procedures. And again, the problem we're currently facing is right now in our society, the only model that's being pushed is the medical model. And without the social model, we're left with a gaping hole in our access needs as disabled people. What this means is all the responsibility for access in our society is offloaded onto the individual. And especially for mental disabilities, as someone who's already struggling, this is a lot more stress than an individual ever needs. And this is why a lot of disability activism is focused on bringing the social model into light and having both of these work together in synergy. So, how does this all relate to DID? I know I just told you a whole bunch of theory on social versus medical models, but what does this actually mean for people with DID or OSDD? Something that I've personally found within my journey of being a disability activist and being part of an OSDD system is realizing how completely and utterly pushed down the medical model route we are as systems. We are told constantly that our only supports should be therapy, and beyond that, only other members of the DID or OSDD community can be proper supports to us. I mean, heck, statistics show that only 6% of systems are out and proud about it. The other 94% live in hiding. They live in fear of what society would say and do to us as individuals. And that is not proper societal support and proper societal access. We cannot fully engage in society if we are afraid to even exist as we are. There's a lot more society can do to support us, and it has a long way to go, and that's part of the reason why we do these videos, and a lot of what we're aiming for in the future. So what we've done in our role and digesting all of this is spending time imagining what an accessible society would be like for DID and OSDD systems. And when we've grown up in this environment of complete medical model with no other options, it's hard. And it's hard to imagine in isolation what an accessible society would look like for you. We've put months and months into this, and if you want to put any of your thoughts down in the comments along with ours, please do. And with that, here's what we've thought of. Number 1, let's bring down that average 7 years that it takes to get properly diagnosed and properly treated. Imagine if we had proper DID education all the way down to the college, undergraduate, and normal psychology, all the way down to high school, abnormal psychology. Not even touching about the fact that it's labeled abnormal psychology in the first place, because this is a natural defense mechanism in reaction to trauma. But imagine if we had proper education for all therapists, for all general doctors, for all pediatricians, for every healthcare worker who has to interact with people who might be experiencing the first signs and symptoms. The reason why that 7 years is so long is because so many people are unaware of DID. And secondly, the other reason why those 7 years are so long to get proper treatment is because of finances. Therapy costs a lot of money. As I said, almost $100 a session, and especially when DID therapy often takes 10 years or more to complete, that's 10 years of $100 weekly therapy sessions. That's a lot of money. It would be a huge step to making society more accessible if therapy was supported for people in rough financial situations. And with all of that, imagine if we just had general societal acceptance of trauma. This means that people would actually respect people's triggers. If you got triggered in a public space, or if you even talked about getting triggered on the internet, you wouldn't get ridiculed, you wouldn't get laughed at, you wouldn't get questions, you'd get real actual support. People would actually remember to put content warnings on everything. We'd be able to engage with all forms of content safely, without fear of getting triggered, and with that we get triggered and have panic attacks and flashbacks much less when engaging with society, which means that we can do so more wholeheartedly and without breaks and interruptions. What if people were generally accepting of dissociation? This would mean at large gatherings there would be designated grounding rooms, places for people who were dissociating to go and rest, to recenter yourself with grounding objects and sensory things to help recenter yourself in your body. This would mean there might be hotlines designated to someone who's having a dissociative episode to help you reground, or hotlines dedicated to helping you through getting triggered into a flashback and having to deal with those memories. Imagine if you got into a trauma headspace of thinking that abuse was happening to you right now, even though if it wasn't, and there was a phone number you could call to help walk you through that and get you back centered in reality and what's happening today. What if we had actual accommodations when it comes to education? What if for tests and quizzes they actually acknowledge the amnesia barriers between alters and let you wait until the alter that took the class is also fronting to take the test? What if they gave you extra time for dissociation? What if you communicated with professors and lecture slides and recordings were always available so multiple alters could absorb the content even over amnesia barriers? Furthermore, branching farther out, what if we had actually good child support services and school systems? What if both of these things acknowledged the fact that DID existed and could look for that in children and then actually be able to connect them to systems that would really support them? And with that, what if we had a functional child protective service? What if we had functional foster care that didn't leave people feeling more traumatized when they came out on the other end? Some parts of foster care are really good. Some parts are also not too good and kind of traumatizing. What if we had actual good systems in place to identify children who might have gone through trauma and then connect them to therapists that empathetically helped them? And even for adults, what if we had functional survivor support that was accessible to everyone, both in terms of finances and location and availability? What if we had enough therapists to actually treat people with DID? And then what if we had a functional abuser accountability program? Because right now, we don't really have that. A lot of abusers aren't ever held to justice, or when they are held to justice, get off scot-free. What if we had an actual system other than what we have in place right now that actually held people accountable for what they did and made sure to separate them and their victims so their victims had the time and space to heal, and it was made sure that the abuser couldn't harm anyone else? Because a lot of times our community struggles with not being able to cut off the people who have harmed us in the past, and that greatly impedes our ability to go about and function on a day-to-day basis. Further than that, what if we had a functional system for supplying supplemental income for people with disabilities that didn't pay you below minimum wage? Because if you're not currently aware, SSI pays you below minimum wage. I think it's $13,600 a year, and doesn't allow you to save more than $2,000 individually without canceling your SSI. So what if we had a functional system that gave people supplemental income when they were disabled and fully recognized trauma as a viable disability and let you take as much time as you wanted, even if that meant years off of school and work, to fully focus on your mental health and your therapy? What if our jobs filled us in on missed meetings if another author was fronting, with notes and recordings on everything they talked about? And then finally, what if we could just feel comfortable in our own skin? What if we could feel comfortable talking about when we switched, or about the fact that we're plural, or the fact that we have so many memory issues? What if we could just feel comfortable being ourselves, talking about ourselves, and then being supported by our communities, other than just the DID community? Some of my strongest support has been from close singlets in my life, but the sad fact is they're few and far between, because so many people I've talked about the system with have ignored it or brushed it off or changed the subject every time I've brought it up. So what if we could be comfortable using our names, using our pronouns when we wanted to, not feeling ashamed about being an alter in a system, not having to hide who we are, not having to spend hours and hours of work putting up a mask that kind of resembles everyone in the system so we can all hide and properly pretend to be one person. I'm thinking about all those times we've missed meetings where someone who's perfectly capable of showing up to the meeting could have gone, but we ended up not going because they were unable to mask. I'm thinking about all those classes in college where we didn't speak up because someone was fronting who had a noticeably different accent. And on that note, what about being okay to acknowledge not knowing who you are? People with DID and OSDD don't always know who's in front, or there's multiple people in the front. Imagine a world where it's not required to use your name to introduce yourself. It might be okay to say, oh, I just don't know who I am right now, or even introduce yourself with a collective name if you are plural or multiple. These are all relatively small things. What this means is we can finally interact as ourselves, as who we are, without masking, without hiding, to just be accepted and acknowledged and heard in society. And that means we can fully focus on figuring out who we are and working to heal from the stuff that has happened in our past. And this is just the start. As I said earlier, we can spend hours and hours imagining what accessible society would look like for systems. And I'm sure I've barely scratched the surface with this, because I've just been sitting here by myself and maybe a couple of other systems just brainstorming. But at the end of the day, we as systems deserve more from society. We deserve to have a society that is accessible to us. We deserve to have a society we are included in, all the way down to the fabric of how it's built, to make sure that we are included and heard and loved and understood. So thank you for listening, and thank you for learning from this. And if you have the chance, always speak up about when you see content warnings not being used, when a grounding space could be implemented, when you see someone disrespecting someone else's triggers. Speak up about these things. Make society more accessible with your every movement, with your every word. As you move through a society, move through it to change it. We love you, we're here for you, and we hope you have an absolutely wonderful day.